for gentrification that unfortunately happens with major redevelopment projects like this, bring in people with more income, more disposable income, which is really the whole idea behind redevelopment. So we just want to make sure that people in the community get what they need out of this also, so that they're not being left behind. So now what I want to do next is I want to introduce Gavin Kearney from the New York Lawyers for the Public Interest to come in and talk a little bit about what the CBA is, how they work, and things like that. So, Gavin, if you will.
Thanks. Got some cheats, my cheat sheet here.
So Gavin, we'll pass those out for you before you start.
That's different than this, but
Oh, okay. And we'll do that too.
What Greg is passing around is a two-sided handout that kind of summarizes a lot of what Vernon just talked about and some of what I'm going to talk about. In broad strokes, talks about who the alliance is, what it is we're trying to accomplish, and how we intend to accomplish those things. And then at the end of it, you'll see that there are a couple of online resources folks can look to if you're interested in learning more about community benefits agreements, if you're interested in looking at examples of community benefits agreements that have been signed around the country. What I'm going to do after I introduce myself a little bit is just kind of give you guys a real thumbnail sketch. I don't want to, I can talk to you for hours, but you don't want to know. So I'll give you a thumbnail sketch of what a community benefits agreement is, how it fits into an advocacy effort. It's really a tool. It's not the effort itself. It's a tool that can aid advocacy efforts to ensure responsible development. And then I'll highlight some of the issues that the CBA typically addresses, and then I think we'll move on to questions and comments and that sort of thing. So, as Vernon said, I'm with New York Lawyers for the Public Interest. We are a nonprofit civil rights law firm that's located in New York City. The practice area that I primarily work in is our environmental justice and community development area. And we, in addition to working with the coalition up here in Yonkers, have been involved with a couple of different community benefits agreements efforts down in New York City also. As Vernon mentioned, one of the other things that my office does is we operate a pro bono clearinghouse, which is a way of matching private firms with public interest, community-oriented projects. Sometimes we do the match and step back, and sometimes we do the match and we co-counsel with a private firm. So in this particular instance, we're also working with Milbank Tweed, which is a firm in New York City, and specifically working with attorneys from that firm who have background and expertise in negotiating and drafting complex agreements and things like that. So I'm sort of taking the reins for the lawyer spiel tonight, but in future, or this afternoon I should say, I think next week they're going to be taking the reins on that, and we do get involved, we get to meet those folks too. So, real quickly, what is a community benefits agreement? As I said, it's the end result of the process. A community benefits agreement is an agreement that hopefully you arrive at after you've done all of your legwork. Some of it Vernon talked about, engaging the community, developing broad support for your efforts, building a coalition, and then when you get that broad support, when you've done that legwork, when you've figured out what it is that the community wants and needs around the development, then you go through an equally challenging process, which is sitting down with the developer and negotiating an agreement like this. In specific terms, a community benefits agreement is a legally enforceable contract. It's a contract that's signed by the developer, and it's a contract that's signed by the coalition that negotiates. And in a contract, for it to be legally enforceable, it needs to be something where both parties are giving up something of value. So what the developer might give up, I'll talk about in a minute, and I think some of those things might be self-evident. What the community gives up is the community gives up its right to oppose the development. What you're saying in negotiating an agreement is, we can support your development if it's done in this way and under these terms. We're not going to take efforts to block it. We're not going to litigate it. We're not going to file litigation to try to stop it. So those are the things that the community gives up that are of value in a CBA process. the benefits of having a community benefits agreement, the benefits of having a legally enforceable contract. I think folks in the room probably know that a lot of times when developments are proposed for communities, there's talk about sort of general benefits that will accrue from it, general promises. This is going to be a great economic engine. This is going to create jobs. This is going to create housing. What's often not part of that is real concrete goals, a way of monitoring whether those goals are realized, and then a way of taking action if those goals aren't realized. So you may say this is going to create jobs for the community, but 3, 4, 5 years down the road, when you try to figure out whether that actually did happen, whether it created jobs, whether those jobs went to folks in the community, et cetera, you don't really have a mechanism for doing that. So what a community benefits agreement can do is it can take those general promises, it can take those general goals, those general desires, and boil them down into very specific, concrete commitments and goals. If it's done right for each goal, for each commitment, they'll provide a mechanism for monitoring it, whether it's a quarterly report, an annual report, things like that. And then it will include mechanisms for how you can address failure to comply with commitments. And the developer will have recourse if the community doesn't hold up its end of the bargain. The community will have recourse if the developer doesn't hold up their end. In terms of issues typically addressed in a community benefits agreement, for folks that are interested, there's the link. You can read as many, probably more community benefits agreements online than you'll ever want to read. But they typically address the kinds of things that you would expect. It varies a bit by the nature of the development. Obviously, if it's a community benefits agreement that deals with an industrial development, it might look different than a community benefits agreement that deals with a housing development. But the things that it typically addresses are jobs, both construction jobs and post-construction jobs. And in terms of how it addresses jobs, oftentimes there are terms to help ensure that those jobs actually go to local area residents, those people most impacted by the development. Oftentimes there are terms about the quality of jobs. As I said, there would be monitoring mechanisms in place to ensure that those job-related goals are being met and that the community has a way of evaluating whether they're being met. They often address issues of affordable housing and availability of housing to local residents. There's a community, for example, a community benefits agreement in New York around the Atlantic Yards development, which folks may have heard of because it's a fairly newsworthy development that had specific, and newsworthy is kind of an understatement, I guess. People have mixed feelings about it, but if you look at that community benefits agreement, it'll give you some sense of some of the housing provisions that you might see in a community benefits agreement. Things like percentages, target affordability rates, that type of thing. Oftentimes there are terms related to support for local businesses. It's a large retail development that could look like a developer commitment to setting aside a certain percentage of space for existing local businesses. If there are businesses that are going to be displaced by the development or potentially displaced by the development, it may be provisions that give priority to those displaced businesses, et cetera. Obviously, they often address environmental issues. Large developments have a whole variety of impacts that communities are legitimately concerned about, whether it's traffic, whether it's the environmental impacts from the construction process, whether it's emissions from the facility itself, particularly in the context of industrial developments. CBAs oftentimes incorporate terms for green building design, for developing a traffic plan, for developing plans to minimize other types of impacts that come from the development. And then community benefits agreements often also typically address more general community support issues, providing space for community-based organizations, cultural organizations, community meeting space, things like that. The process of creating a community benefits agreement, I